welcome to the Intuitively Wild podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Levine. Living intuitively wild is about coming back home to ourselves. Here, we talk about how to live connected to ourselves, others, and nature, and make a commitment to radical authenticity, vulnerability, and acceptance. On this podcast, we delve into a wide range of topics that span the human experience. We peel back the layers and talk about the things that are often not talked about. This is a space for us all to walk and wander this path of life together. Let's dig into our roots and go deep. Hello, hi, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. Today on the podcast, we have an extra magical episode, and it is with Adriana Keefe. So Adriana is a human design coach and motivational speaker who guides women in becoming more of who they really are. So prosperity, purpose, and passion find them. She's a 4/6 manifesting generator by human design, wife and mother to 3 children, lover of animals and the show New Girl, and host of the No BS Human Design podcast. And she is all of those amazing things and more, but she really is just a true, authentic, integritous human. I have followed Adriana and listened to her podcast for a while now, and I've always loved her work. And when I was able to connect with her in person or virtually in real time, it was really special to me because she was so kind and compassionate and open-hearted and just herself right away. And it reaffirmed to me that the most important thing for me is living intentionally and confidently and authentically. All the people that I look up to and want to be around are people who are living in that way. And Adriana is definitely one of those people, and I'm so excited to share her voice and pieces of her heart and her story and her soul on the podcast today. And that's really the crux of our conversation, is how Adriana has grown to live in this way and embody this way of being, and what may get in the way of us being authentic and intentional and confident. I can't wait for you guys to listen to this one. Adriana, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I've been really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you for having me. I am so excited to be here and hear whatever crazy questions you're going to ask me.
Well, one question I love to start with is, what is something you wish people knew about you that you don't think many do?
That I am way less confident on the inside than I look on the outside. I have resting bitch face, for sure.
That's so funny. Well, one, people say I have resting sad face, whatever that means. But I think that
Terrible.
Yeah, I know. I think that maybe it's a Scorpio thing, just having this
Probably
facade on the outside that we don't even realize. And that's a very common answer, either that I'm not as confident as I seem, or I'm not as outgoing as I seem. That's been a recurring theme with guests over and over. So I think you're not alone in that. And why do you wish people knew that you weren't as confident as you seem?
I've started noticing, I'd say over the last year or so, that the pedestal that I would put some people I look up to on, that was now happening with people who were like listeners of my podcast or had come and done a chart reading with me. They'd seen me speak somewhere, and then, they'd get on the Zoom call with me or in my Instagram DMs, which I am the one in my DMs. And they would literally say things to me like, oh my gosh, I'm fangirling. Like, I can't believe I'm talking to you, or thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk to me. And it took me aback because I was like, I recognized me and them where I would think I wasn't worthy enough for someone I looked up to then respond to me in DMs, respond to my email, whatever it is. And I just take those moments and I want to gently remind them, like, thank you for saying that. First of all, thank you for being in my world. And I see you as a human that is not unlike me. And I know that I have a very strong, big aura, very intimidating energy on top of the RBF. So I've heard multiple times I can be rather unapproachable. But I want people to feel safe and comfortable with me. And I think that's probably where my goofy side comes out. I like to be funny and playful and light. And I think that that helps kind of clear up that energy. But I just want people to know that I'm just a person with all my own stuff, all my own faults, all my own issues, just like they are.
It's easy to put people on pedestals, especially when we're seeing them
Yeah.
on social media. We're seeing these edited versions of people. It's so important to remind ourselves that we are all humans. We all have to wake up in the morning. We all have to brush our teeth. We're all just living our lives.
Mhm. Yeah.
And the people who I really look up to are the people who are authentic and confident in like a very grounded way. Just embody their truth without needing to explain themselves, and who recognize that we are all on the same level. It's really important to remember. And there's also that saying, you don't want to meet your idols, because sometimes they disappoint you because we realize that they're just human.
Yeah.
And I like to think that if we look up to someone, they're people who also, when we met them, would be a real, like, would meet us at that. Like, it would be a nice connection. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. I mean, I would like to say that the day I meet Machine Gun Kelly, I will be best friends with him. I'm positive of that one. He will like me. But you're so right. I like that quote a lot. I feel like I've probably heard that. But it's true. But I mean, everybody poops. We're all human.
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly. Part of your story that you've shared is how you felt shut down and far away from yourself for a long time. What was the process of you beginning to realize this and starting to reconnect to yourself?
so long story short, when I was pregnant with my second daughter, I quote had it all. I was a successful realtor. I was married very happily, still am. That's not the past tense. Um, we were financially great. We had a house, everything looked so great from the outside. But I was really struggling. I was anxious. My job at real estate is so stressful. They don't tell you that when you're getting calls at like 11 p.m. at night. I'm going through the summer realizing I never took my other daughter to the beach, like ever. I didn't enjoy weekends because I was working. And that was a moment in my life where I recognized something really had to change. I do have in human design, I have a defined G center, which I think has always really helped guide me. I've always had this inner knowing that I have this bigger purpose here. And I also have the channel of struggle. So I was not going to stop until I figured out what it was I was here to do. And then I hired my first life coach. I actually had like three life coaches. And then one of them eventually was a more spiritual, holistic life coach, which I considered myself agnostic, atheist. I grew up in a Christian Catholic household, and it did not resonate with me after many years of abuse and asking, God, whoever, for help and not receiving it. So I stopped believing in anything. And so this coach that I hired, I just again had that body knowing. I was like, she's got something different for me. And she introduced me to this thing called human design. And at that time, I had been in therapy for many years. I had done EMDR for the trauma from my childhood. And while EMDR works, and I'm still an advocate of therapy, I still go to therapy every other week. I realized that it neutralized a lot of the pain and the flashbacks, but I was still a shell of a human. I was like, okay, now what? Like, who am I? I don't understand anything. I'm a line four, but I was super, I wouldn't talk to people. I was scared of people. I was terrified of rejection. So I was unfulfilled socially, professionally, everything. And so that kind of opened me up to this whole new world of it said I was this thing called a manifesting generator, which I resonated with. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not broken. Like I'm supposed to be this hyper multifaceted. I had been diagnosed with ADHD. My family constantly told me I was too much as a kid, really dulled myself down. And when I saw that and I felt that resonance, I was like, wait, what does this mean? If this all it took was my birthday, and it's saying things that make sense, what does that mean on the bigger scale? And that started my spiritual awakening, I would call it. That has just changed everything for me.
Wow. Yeah, I mean that self-understanding and self-connection that human design can bring us can shift everything, can change our whole lives. One thing I want to note on is that you being a four line and having that struggle of trusting people. That
Hmm.
seems to be a common struggle with four lines. I mean, I think for other profile lines as well for different reasons, but I think with fours, relationships are so important to them, close relationships
Yep.
specifically, that it can feel so scary to let people in in that way.
Hmm.
That seemed to be a common theme for you. How did you navigate that as you started to learn more about human design?
Mhm. Yeah, that's the first part of my chart that I met with resistance. I was like, well, that's inaccurate. I do not have a large social network. There's no way. And then I started to learn more about it, where, line fours tend to be the one who's like, oh my God, let me connect you with this person. Let me connect you with that person. And I was like, okay, that is me. Like, I'm the person, if someone's looking for a plumber, I'm like, hold on, I've got a guy. Don't
Hmm.
bother Googling. So when I saw that that actually resonated, I started playing with the idea of like, well, what would it feel like or what would it look like if I actually let myself expand a little bit more into networking or talking to people at the gym I go to. And that fear of rejection is real. I mean, it's a foundational line. We need to feel solid in whatever we have, whatever space we're in. So I'm still not extroverted. I actually would consider myself more introverted until I feel safe in the space that I'm in. And then I become like the class clown. So I guess I just kept practicing talking to people, practicing allowing that piece of me that likes to break the intimacy barrier, that likes to know about people. I just start letting it go, letting it happen. And I will say, if it wasn't related to business, if it was more personal, a lot of women were reluctant because we were raised in a mean girl society. And when I poke and prod and ask them about real feelings and real life stuff, it can feel fake to people because they're like, why is she asking me this? Because we're in such a superficial society. But then when people get to know me, when they allow that conversation, it actually just happened this past week. I had a new mom friend over for my daughter's preschool friend. We had barely had a conversation before, but we sat down, we had a beautiful 3-hour conversation about each other's entire lives. And she was receptive and I was receptive. It broke down the intimacy barrier there where I feel very comfortable with her and we had a great time. But it takes just allowing myself to feel that pushback from other people, especially women, but knowing and trusting that I'm leaning into my design and it's up to them whether or not they want to pick up what I'm putting down. There's only so much I can have control over.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many layers of that I want to tap into, but the last thing you just said, trusting, if I'm aligned, if I'm living in alignment with my design and trusting myself, I can't control how anyone else responds to that or perceives that. I mean, me having a 5 in my profile, I've had to really accept that and continuing to just live in alignment with our intuition and our design. And when you're talking about breaking down the intimacy barrier, I was talking with my mom recently and she was sharing with me something that she listened to, I think from Esther Perel. And I'm summarizing. I didn't listen to the whole thing, but my mom was saying that she was sharing how mental health and connection are so intertwined. And we can't be mentally well if we are not connected to others. And wanting connection is a sign of mental health, and having connection is a sign of mental health. So when we are putting up a barrier between ourselves and others, it's a sign that something's off. And we need to, of course, it doesn't mean that you have to be extroverted and have a bunch of friends, but it means if you are seeking disconnection over connection, there is something there for us to dig into.
Hmm. My husband and I are big fans of Esther Perel. We love her work. And I would definitely agree with that. A lot of the walls that we've put up, the way that I'm talking about moving into connection, I'm not asking people to ignore why those walls are there. I think it's really important to look back on your childhood, probably with a professional if that feels right for you, and really validate that younger version of you. Like your brain and your subconscious is just protecting you the way it knows best. So it's obvious why I have and continue to react to things that I would rather not react in that way. But I mean, like I was a child being abused who went for help and was told it wasn't really happening. And like that kind of stuff, you lose trust in what you think you feel and what is real and what is safe. So obviously, you're going to react to things by having walls put up. No matter what kind of trauma you've had, we all have had situations that made us lose trust and connection. And even what's his name? Dan Buettner with the Blue Zones of Happiness. He's literally gone to the places on earth that are the happiest, living the longest purposefully, like still working in the fields happily. And one of the most foundational basic human needs that he finds over time, besides eating good food, is literally human connection and purpose. And I think they very much go hand in hand. I think it's hard to find purpose if you don't have connection to other people. So there's actual research and studies that back that up, that leads to a more meaningful, longer, happy life.
And it does start with having that connection to ourselves and being able to validate your younger self within you and say, it makes sense that you are responding in that way and soothing yourself and having compassion for yourself. Our behaviors can shift when we start with that acceptance and compassion. Once we have had compassion for our past behaviors, instead of continuously having frustration around them or wishing that we were able to respond in a different way, then we can shift them. We can't shift them out of a place of frustration and anger and force. It really has to come from that softness and that compassion. It's a work in progress always, but that's the first step. I'm curious how you moved through that. What tools, because I know you said you went to therapy, you did EMDR, and those are all really helpful for you, but you were still feeling stuck. So was it human design that kind of moved the needle, or what helped you move through that?
This is actually how I kind of found my niche, if you will, within human design, because a lot of educators were out there teaching it and basically asking me to believe in a system and something that's like on my computer without me having anything bigger than me to believe that it was at play here. Like I didn't believe in God or the universe or source or any of that. So I had to start, first of all, telling my body it was safe to practice this, experiment with this. So that was a lot of nervous system regulation. This is what I implement with my clients. I don't teach human design just to teach it. I'm like, how can we integrate this into your being right here, right now, and to teach your body that it's safe to lean into this. And then the second step being opening yourself up to a sense of spirituality. It doesn't matter what it is. I don't care if my clients believe in God, if they Buddha, Sky Daddy, I don't care. But it's, what do you have here that makes you feel supported? Whether or not you want to believe that there's something bigger at play here, if you see your human design chart or anything, if you see your astrology, your numerology, and it resonates, that means there's something bigger at play. I mean, whether it's aliens on another planet or whatever, there's something here that connects us all. So for me, it was a lot of nervous system regulation. Continue to do it every single day. Every time I have a growth spurt, it's new level, old devil, right? So leaning into what needs to be healed and work through it and feeling safe. And then co-creating with something that's bigger than me, really building that trust muscle. Everyone's into the manifestation term. I can't stand the word manifestation anymore because of all the mainstream stuff that just doesn't work if you're not a nervous system regulated kind of person like I wasn't. But really believing that there's something here supporting you.
I do think that the key to a life fully lived is a regulated nervous system, because we can't be present if we're not regulated. If we have a dysregulated nervous system, we're always in the past or in the future, ruminating, anxious. We're always operating from that reactive state.
Yep.
Being a manifesting generator, I'm always trying to respond to things and reminding myself that there's a big difference between reacting and responding. And when our nervous system is dysregulated. We're constantly just reacting. And having the tools to pause and stop and ask myself, am I reacting or responding? Having that awareness has been so helpful for me, especially having an emotional authority. But without the tools to regulate our nervous system, we're just going about our lives ungrounded, unpresent.
Mm-hmm. And making decisions still out of fear or the mind. Like when I first started, I would think I was making an emotionally clear decision, but it wasn't a grounded one. It was, something that was out of fear in my mind and in my subconscious. So a lot of that became more clear, and you start to feel the difference, but it does take just giving yourself some time and grace to experiment with it at first.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's about experimenting. It's about trying different things and seeing what works for you and just trying human design out, because as they say, human design is an experiment. And what I always tell people is like, if you don't trust it, just try one tiny piece of it. Try it on for size, play with it,
Yep.
and have fun with it. We take life so seriously, especially in that health and wellness world and in the self-help world, the spirituality world. We take things so seriously, or at least we can. I know I can. I think bringing a sense of play and joy and awe to it is how we really embody and integrate the healing and the transformations that we are trying to pursue.
1000%. Yeah. I definitely fall into that making things too serious and deep rut. And then I'll wake up one day and be like, oh, I don't want to do this. And I'm like, oh, it's because I'm not playing. It's because I'm not making it light. And believe it or not, you can make this work light and playful. That's one of my favorite aspects of the work that I do, is like practicing co-creating with the universe, with source. If I feel like I need a little pick me up, I'm like, hey, universe, can you send me like a free coffee? Because that would be cool. And then when that free coffee comes, I'm like, oh my God, someone is listening. It's just like, these things, but you just need to have fun. It's like dating. Like, go on a date with yourself, go on a date with the universe, go on a date with your chart, and just lighten it up a little bit.
How do you practice that trust in the universe other than, like, what if you ask for the coffee and it doesn't come?
Mm.
What do you do then?
Yes, I love this. I love talking about this because I was such a student of all the law of attraction and manifestation like years ago. And I tried all of that. And when I was like, I'm visualizing every day and it's not working, I gave up. I completely stopped. I was like, clearly that's not real. And what I learned over time was that I didn't actually deeply trust it. I was looking for this magic bullet that would just like fix everything, but I wasn't actually doing any of the healing work. I truly believe that you manifest, if you want to use that word, call in things from a subconscious level. So if you feel subconsciously that you are worthy of receiving something and that you actually trust it can happen, it does. If you ask for something just because you think this is the easy way or whatever, it's a learning process. So what on those days, this was like only a year or two ago, I did one of those coffee asks. And the day went by and I was like, that's weird. I haven't gotten it. And all of a sudden I get in my car and my husband had left me a Red Bull in my car for me as like a little afternoon pick me up. And I was like, okay, well, I asked for a coffee, but I got a Red Bull. And what had been happening to me in my life at that point in time was that I didn't realize the actual truth and impact behind how my work was evolving. And so for me, that was a sign from the universe of like, oh, girl, you're getting caffeine, but it's not going to be in the way that you think it is. And so the same message, very similar messages, if you don't receive the thing, just get curious about it. Oh, okay. Why am I not trusting that this is real? Or why do I not feel like this is something I am worthy of receiving? Why can I not let it be that easy? And just really sitting with that. I really love meditation or hypnosis to identify what you're holding subconsciously, because it's not always easy to pull that through consciously, or else you would probably already know exactly what you need to do. But tapping can help with that too. And just being curious. Why didn't I get that? What do I need to heal here?
And that's where the intuition piece comes into play, because
Mm.
the universe doesn't actually speak to us and just tell us exactly what we need to do or what's happening. We need to then trust the message that is coming out of us, that is the meaning of what the universe is. That's where the conversation is happening. The coffee shows up and we're like, okay, what does this mean? And our intuition is what tells us that meaning, that inner knowing within us. Mm-hmm. And also leaning into trust versus control, not trying to force or control the meaning or what's happening out of a place of fear, but really just trusting that it's all happening for us and leaning into that.
And letting go of the pressure. If anything feels pressurized, if anything is put on a timeline, you can basically expect that it's not going to happen, because it's like putting a ticking time bomb on the subconscious. And then the second you don't get it in your timeline, you give up completely. So I stopped putting any sort of timeline on anything I'm trying to call in. I stopped allowing pressure, which took time. That's not something you can just be like, okay, I'm going to lift the pressure from this. Like, my husband was unemployed for 9 months last year. That was very pressurized. And that took a toll on that was around the time when I got the Red Bull instead of the coffee, because I was like, wait, I'm not calling in things the same way. What's happening? I was very pressurized financially. And then when he got a job, thankfully, in like late November, it was like my magic was turned back on. So you definitely have to really take a look at where you're putting pressure and how you can relieve it, even just for a little bit.
A couple minutes ago, you mentioned the word purpose. And I want to dig into that more, because I think that a lot of people are seeking purpose or wanting to find their purpose, declare their purpose. What does purpose mean to you? And how do you define that word?
Purpose to me feels like having lived life, knowing that I left this planet better than it was when I got here. And I know that's not something that can really be measured right now, but it can be measured in the small ways. Like when, my clients reach out to me and, just so you know, this happened today, and it's because of our work together. Or when I'm brushing my daughter's hair a little too hard and she's like, ouch, mom, that hurts. And I'm like, oh, stop, it doesn't hurt. And then she catches me in my own lesson where she's like, mom, it's my body and I'm telling you it hurts. And I'm like, wow, you're right. And I taught you that. And it's like those moments of I'm making an impact, and I feel fulfilled. Like trying to find a word that's different than fulfilled or purposeful. Like, I feel like I'm actually making an impact here. And I think the word impact can put people off, because for me, impact is big. Like, I'm also a line 6. So the imprint that I want to leave on this world is going to be huge. But for impact for anyone can look like, you got to the end of your life knowing you raised your kids the best you could and they're happy and you're happy. And that was the imprint you wanted to leave on the world. So for me, it's about like impact and how I've left the world in a better way.
How do you show up for your purpose every day? Is that something that you think about and that you put intentional action into, or is it something that you just try to embody?
I'd say it's both. I say at this point in my life, I'm still actively having to be intentional about it, especially in the season of life where I have 3 young kids, and it can be so easy to fall off of my routines and things that keep me spiritually cleansed and focused. I have a million reminders that go off on my phone every day to stop, to open my heart. Like, that kind of thing is very intentional. And I will say, the more I've been doing this work and the more feedback I get from the people I work with, the more I realize my magic naturally unfolds when I try less hard. So I will say I'm intentional about working hard to allow myself to expand physically, mentally, spiritually. But when it comes to being in my work, I also have an open ajna and an open heart. So I can get too much on the like trying to prep and trying to say the right thing. But when I just let that go and I just show up knowing my magic is there, that just happens authentically.
The getting out of our own way piece, and then knowing that if we are showing up in alignment, which just means as our best selves, then we will unfold, our energy will unfold. How do you teach your kids about this way of living and being? Because I know that, I'm sure, coming from the background that you've lived through, you want something different for them. And I don't have kids yet, but I'm really excited to, because I want to give them pieces of my wisdom and my knowledge that I wish I had when I was younger. Yeah, I just love to hear about how you show up for your kids in that way.
I will say I started being really intentional about how I teach my kids before I even knew about human design. My 9-year-old, when I realized, I'm having a girl, I'm like, okay, how am I going to teach her about her body and her private parts? Because that was a big part of my abuse as a child. And making sure that there's a clear line of communication, that she feels safe talking to me, that she knows how to protect herself. So all of that naturally, I probably am hyper aware of that, honestly, but we give them books. I have 2 daughters now and 1 son. And so they have books on private parts, on their actual names, on what to do, who their safe people are, who to tell, that kind of thing. There's a lot of really awesome kids books out there now for like any topic around any awareness. Um, my second daughter is a very highly sensitive Cancer empath, and she she needs more tools like tapping, and so that she has a tapping for kids book. I have this really beautiful photo I took a few months ago. We all got pretty sick in this house, but it hit my 9-year-old last, and so she was like in my bed. She was crying because her stomach hurt so much. Oh, she had a really bad headache, I think it was. And my 4-year-old went and got her tapping book, and she stood next to my 9-year-old. And the picture I have is her showing my 9-year-old where to tap. And
Oh,
although my 9-year-old was, I'm literally gonna cry thinking about it. Like looking at that, knowing the way that I was raised, where I was told to stop crying, that you're being too emotional, like nothing's wrong. That was a huge, huge win, I think, for us as parents. And then they also have human design for kids books. Like my 9-year-old's a manifester. And so she has a manifester affirmations book. She's listened to like audio things on the Jenna Zoe app about manifester energy. And my 4-year-old has too, about her generator energy, but she doesn't really get it yet. So there's lots of tools for kids now, which is incredible. I just had someone on my podcast a couple weeks ago. Her name is Jess Bubico. She has an emotional awareness from a human design standpoint book for kids. I think it's called
mhm.
Jessie Lou and the Magic of You. And so there's lots of tools out there now. And I like books. I love to go to books and let them guide me.
Yeah. Oh, that I was getting emotional there because I don't necessarily want to say to everyone like everything happens for a reason, but I do think that our pain helps inform our present.
Yep.
And for example, when I have kids, I know that I'm going to be so hyper aware and sensitive to topics around food and body image and all that kind of stuff because of my past. And yes, I can look at that in so many ways, but I can also be really grateful that it's going to make me have different kinds of conversations with my kids around those topics and help them have a different connection to those topics because of my past.
Mm.
So I think that is so impactful. We were speaking about impact before. That is a huge impact
You're
to show.
right. Yeah. Just breaking the generational patterns right there
Mhm.
with like asking your kid about how they feel instead of telling them they're okay when they fall. Just those little things that creates a massive ripple effect.
Yes, exactly. And what is something that you wish people talked about more that you don't hear people talking about a lot, or that you wish that you were able to talk about more?
Honestly, it probably would be nervous system regulation, which
Mm.
I feel like everybody talks about these days, but it's really just everybody in my world.
And that's because it's really important.
Yeah. Yeah, that and maybe emotional intelligence. I think the two of those combined, because when I meet someone these days, and if they're very reactive, or they're screaming at their child in the store, I have a different perception of that now than I used to, where old version of me would have totally judged that mom, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, she has so much pain. Like I hope that she is able to release this pain. I hope that, her child at some point will forgive her. And we all have things that we've screwed up with our kids. I always tell my kids, like, I'm gonna screw you up, but I will pay for your therapy, because there's only so much we can do. but really nervous system regulation.
Yeah, having understanding for other people's reactions to life, whether they're strangers or whether they're family members, we all respond to things that in ways that we wish we didn't. And sometimes we don't even understand yet why we're responding in
Mhm.
those ways. And I've just learned to have not only compassion, but also a neutrality around situations. When I see someone, let's take your example of a mom responding in a reactive way to a kid in a grocery store. I try to stay neutral to that. I mean, within boundaries, but to stay neutral to that because I don't know what the mom's going through. I don't know what's been going on in their lives. I don't know who they are. There's so much that we don't know about their story. And there have been times when I have reacted in a grocery store in ways that I wish I hadn't, and people don't know what's going on with me.
Yep.
So yeah, the compassion and the neutrality when and if possible is really helpful, and it takes the attachment and our projections away from it.
Yes, I mean, usually that's what it is. It's our projections that are putting on someone else. Like 90% of the time it is. And so the more we can recognize the stuff inside us that needs to be healed, the easier it is to perceive the world with empathy and compassion and then neutrality when you need to.
What is something that you've learned to love about yourself that you used to reject or feel insecure about or have resistance to?
I really, I actually am this is the first time I've thought about this in a while, and the fact that I have a list of things I could give you right now makes me feel really proud of the work that I've done. The biggest, I think my favorite would be my too muchness. That
Mm.
was a huge wound, and I'm not going to say it's gone. It still occurs. It still happens. But this too muchness, this like provoking people to break down their walls, that is such a gift, and I have made some really incredible relationships and really helped people and connected people to each other when they really needed it most. When I think some people would have just shied away, backed off because their walls were up. And I'm just like, we're going to be friends. And like just letting that energy kind of come out of me, being funny, being the icebreaker. I really love that about me now. And it's interesting. Just last month, I went to speak at a conference in Virginia, and that was the first big conference I've spoken at in a while. I want to say a while. And so it was the first time in a while I was really testing out this newfound love of my energy. My God, Rachel, the ripple effect that had. I still have people messaging me. I have a group of women who like follow up with me now. Like the me that was there was the most magnetic version of me I've ever seen speak somewhere.
Mm.
And I've made really incredible friends that I talk to all the time now from that. And so that was just proof that even though I showed up completely as myself, I swore on stage, like that's who I am. I have a potty mouth and I'm a lot. And I was totally myself. And people loved me. And I was like, oh, this is real. I had literally put all my work to the test and it aced it. It was a really cool feeling.
I love that so much. And I think a lot of us have had that feeling of too muchness in some way or another, and then have done something to shut it down, to turn off their light, to shut themselves off. And we have to relearn, honestly, I think, make ourselves feel safe again in showing up as who we
Yes.
fully are in our fullness, because it can feel really unsafe to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And there might be times when you show up in that fullness and people don't like you and it's not met well. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't continue to do so. It means that you need to find the right environment and the right
Mm-hmm.
people, and also find the right tools to move through the moments where the world might tell you it's unsafe, and to reaffirm to yourself that it is, and it's okay to be fully yourself.
1,000%. Like we're all going to have people who don't like us, and that's totally fine because the other people love you. Like I
Mm.
just hopped on a call with someone last week who found me after being in a group and I was on their podcast or something like that. And she was so energized when she saw me. She was like, "Can we be best friends?" I was like, "I love you already." And that's the kind of, when people used to always talk about in business, like you'll attract your soulmate clients. That's that energy. You're like having the audacity to be yourself, and these people are your tribe. And it's such a special feeling when you get to experience that.
Audacity. That's one of my favorite words. I say to myself often, I want to have the audacity to be myself and go after my dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Because the world tells you that you should not.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be so, it shouldn't take courage to be ourselves, but it does.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with you for having, for stumbling when it comes to trying to be your authentic self. That's literally everyone is going through that. Just the society we were raised in. I really hope that 30, 40 years from now, it's a completely different environment for the kids, which it seems to be. We're definitely on trajectory of more, I mean, Aquarius, right? Like that's the season we're in. But for now, give yourself grace, be kind to yourself, and just let yourself fall flat on your face, because people are going to love you and pick you up from down there.
So, we talked about something that you've had to work on loving yourself around, but what is a part of your human design chart that you love? Your favorite part of your chart?
I think my G center,
Mm,
because that's like a lot of big energies. It could be I'd say the G to my throat, because I have the 8-1 and I have the 2-14. I mean, the 2 is my vocation. If anyone doesn't know what the hell we're talking about, you can Google the human design gate 2 or gate 8. The 8 is my sun gate. Okay, that's my favorite.
mm,
My sun gate 8, because I've always felt like a rebel, but a rebel with a cause. And I've always been very different. I've been unique. I have bright red ombre in my hair. I had like 20 something piercings at one time. I've got tattoos on my hands and wherever. I used to be really afraid of that me, because people shunned me. Like I wasn't bullied in high school, thankfully, but I wasn't popular. I was just kind of there. And now I realize that I think people were just naturally intimidated by my different energy and my uniqueness. And now I totally lean into that. I'm like, I'm just going to go get a hand tattoo for my birthday because I freaking wanna. And I
mhm,
do. And people are like, oh my God, I love it. And because I'm naturally rebellious. I'm also the middle child in my family. I've always been the black sheep, or the rainbow sheep, as now like to call myself. And now I see that as such a gift. Like, what a generational break I am causing in the patterns of my family. Like, that is me. And I get to say that. And that's really awesome to say.
that is, yeah. I relate to some of that. I sometimes feel like the rainbow sheep in my family. I like that. I like that
Mhm.
saying.
I can sense that about you. You're probably different than your family.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of it, honestly, is I just live life in a different way. I think something that can make me different is leaning into the intuition part and not needing to explain myself and explain how I know things or why I want to do things. And it sounds like that's that's been part of your path too.
Yeah, that the intuitive piece has really unlocked a lot since becoming more aligned. I mean, I started channeling spirit and guides and literally dead people, and so I have been honing in on the mediumship. I'm actually in classes and whatnot, and that's a really cool experience when you actually get to experience another soul that's like next to you or through you talking, um, which is apparently something I did as a kid, my family says, but I
Mm.
clearly wasn't really nourished, so I just lost it. But that's like the more that you lean into, it doesn't matter if it's human design, numerology, astrology, whatever feels good for you, the more just authentic you become and who you really are, these things naturally turn online. Your intuition becomes louder and stronger. You learn yourself, you learn your body's languages. And oh God, life, it feels literally I have on my value, I call them my soul codes. I have 4 of them right here. And the second one is magic, because life literally can feel like magic should you choose to allow it to come in. And that's the phase that I'm in, is just everything feels like magic, and it's really cool.
That's what I'm trying to lean into as well right now. Magic's one of my favorite words. It starts with trust, with for people who are kind of at the beginning phases of this journey. I'm always like, you just have to lean into the trust. And have that blind faith a bit. How does your intuition speak to you, and how do you cultivate that connection and that?
I used to always think everything in my head was just thoughts, like especially when I was talking to someone. And then I learned over time when I'd voice those thoughts, someone would be like, "How did you know?" Or I was just about to say that. Or, "Oh my gosh, my grandma used to say that all the time, but she has died." And the more I started like voicing what was literally, I would hear it in my head,
Mm.
the more I've really built up that muscle. But you have to start just like taking a stab at it. Like for me, I'm clairaudient, claircognizant. I can see things, so a little bit clairvoyant depending on who I'm around, but I mostly like hear and know things. And it just took me starting to ask people. Like one of my friends in human design now, we met around this time last year and we met virtually, and she's just talking to me, telling me about who she is, and this was before I realized I was channeling spirit. And I said, "I'm so sorry, I have to stop you. I keep hearing this voice in my head that's like, ask her about the flowers." And she's like, she sat back in her chair, she took a breath, and she's like, "I just lost my best friend who called me flower girl." And then his name came through and this message came through, and I was totally just like, I felt comfortable with her because I knew she was spiritual, and that helped. I think surrounding yourself with people who are open to receiving what's coming through is really important. And then ever since then, I was like, whoa, I just channeled like a dead person. That was crazy. And so I just keep asking people now. Like if I'm talking to someone, I'll be like, hey, does this mean anything to you? And just play with it.
Wow. Do you have a practice that you use, a ritual that you lean on daily or regularly to connect to yourself in that way? Or is it just that ongoing practice?
Both. Every day, now that I've really opened up the channel, it's important for me. I've learned this the hard way. It's really important for me to close down and clear out often because I will collect so much that it's taken physical tolls on my body. So, grounding, cleansing daily. Honestly, they've told me I had to do twice a day, but I sometimes only do daily because life gets busy and I forget. And then intentional time to practice, like going to the mediumship classes, practicing just with my clients. I had a chart reading today that I delivered a little message for. Again, it's just letting yourself feel like you look stupid if nobody understands the message, and that's okay. Because that doesn't mean like your intuition's wrong. It doesn't mean spirit's not there. It could be a message for someone else, or it could be a message for you that you're just not yet understanding. So intentionally practicing too, for sure.
Yeah, that's the part we have to figure out how it all works. And it's not always going to
Mhm.
be clear cut and concise. It's kind of, it's that co-creating again, that figuring it out as we go along.
Mm-hmm. And then your guides, your angels, your spirit will practice communicating to you in the way that you need them to. So like they started showing up for me in angel numbers a lot. I see angel numbers probably 4 or 5 times a day, every single day. That just started like last year around that same time, to the point where I'm like, okay, guys, I get it. You're here. Like this is enough. But if you need more of that like physical evidence, that's me. I'm totally a sciencey person. They'll give that to you. So just ask for what you need. Tell them you need more clear communication or clear sign, whatever, and they will give it to you. And if you don't get it, that means that it's not the decision or whatever that you're looking for.
Exactly. Everyone, it's going to show up for everyone in different ways. And so just letting, not needing your intuition to speak to you in the same way that someone else's does. And
Yes. Oh, totally different.
I guess on that note, is there, I don't know if this is how it works for you, but is there a message coming through right now that you feel the audience needs to hear?
It's so funny that you just asked me that, because I was just gifted these crystals that I've barely opened. And I was just seeing this one sitting in the little box right here. And I was like, oh, I feel inclined to pick that up and hold it for the first time. So let me just sit for a moment. It's interesting that we were talking about intuition, because one of the biggest things that I feel like is coming through right now is there's just so much fear. I feel like there's a lot of fear in everything right now. That fear, what you're fearing the most right now, is actually the thing you need to move through to get to what you want. Like it's always that one thing that's been paining us that we're too scared to do. But the moment you do it, it literally clears a path to the next step or to the thing that you want. Like recently, one of my clients, she's a projector, and she was talking about, I really need to let go of my retainer clients. Like, I am struggling. It's been like a year of her saying this.
Mm.
She finally decided to send the email, I'm so sorry, I can't do retainer work anymore, whatever. Within weeks, she was gifted an entire vacation beach house at the Cape. Literally, she's there right now, among like other random just abundance things that came through, little magics. I call them little magics that have come through, and that's just showing her, way to go, you moved through the thing that was blocking you. Welcome into abundance. And we hit those things all the time. So I guess just encouragement to think of that one thing that's making you fear right now, or feels heavy, even if it's like clean out your closet. Just go clean out your closet, because you have no idea what you're making energetic space for.
I mean, I got the chills because I feel like you could have been talking directly to me. But what you fear is what you need to turn to in order to heal.
Mhm.
And, actually, my therapist and I talk about this all the time, how some of my biggest fears are connected to some of my greatest desires. And
Yep.
I am constantly being asked to face what I fear, and it's very challenging, but it's always worth it. And I don't always understand. You don't need to understand why you need to face it or how it's all going to happen. Just giving yourself permission, and again, trusting that it's worth it. There's going to be something on the other end. There's going to be magic on the other side. Yeah.
Especially if it's an aligned decision. Like, I'm posting my first in-person retreat alongside one of my business partners, and we were putting off procrastinating signing the contract for that. It's so much money. Like, it's so much money. And we have to put a deposit down. And we had so many interested parties, but nobody had actually paid yet. And I was like, V, this is the thing. This is the energetic leak. We have to sign this contract. We did. Guess what came through that night? Literally that night, we got our first payment in. I'm like, see, you just, what feels like an energetic leak right now, go move through that, and then just allow yourself to receive.
Exactly. Okay. Living intuitively wild means living dedicated to your true, authentic self, no matter what. How do you feel like you live intuitively wild?
Leaning into that rebellious side of me, for sure. Whenever I have those moments of, oh, what's someone going to think of me if I do this? I'm like, oh, then that's the thing I want to do. Let's do that. So letting myself be the rebel that I feel like I've always wanted to be.
I love that. Thank you so much for being here. Please share where everyone can connect with you, work with you, be in your energy, all the things.
Thank you so much for having me. I am on Instagram, Adri Keefe, Adri Keefe, or my podcast is the No BS Human Design Podcast. And every month I host free new moon circles called Co-Create, where it's just a space of like-minded women who are on their spiritual development path and want other women to feel safe in talking about the things that we go through on the spiritual development, co-creating with the universe, God path. And so that the form to sign up for that free monthly circle is also on my Instagram in my link in bio.
Everything will be linked below. And, from our first interaction, I just felt that you were really embodying your truth. Like you were just letting yourself be who you are. And it's really felt. Again, that's the impact, and it's huge, even though it might seem small. So thank you for all the work you do. And
you're making me cry. Thank you for saying that. That means a lot to me. Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're so welcome. I mean it so truthfully. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Intuitively Wild, the podcast. I hope it helped deepen your connection to yourself, sparked some insights, and inspired you to live intuitively wild. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you would share it with others and leave a rating and review. And please reach out to me. I would love to connect with you. I will see you next time for more magic.